Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers wanted to know how feminist indoctrinated women create daughters who become feminists and then eventually become single mothers who wind up growing up in dysfunction. And the answer to that question is very simple. The reason why feminist indoctrinated mothers create daughters who become feminists and single mothers is due to the culture they have been raised in. Now, ever since the, I'd say, 1920s, we have had a culture of feminism created by the wealthy, and the wealthy wanted to create this culture of feminism because they wanted to maintain and protect their wealth base from the competition of other men. And because they wanted to protect their wealth base from the competition of other men, they looked to eliminate men through a social engineering campaign where they look to socialize the women to become feminists and not women. Now, there's a major difference between a feminist and a woman, and many don't really notice the difference because they are looking at women as females, but what they don't understand is that the feminist and a woman have a completely different frame of thinking. A woman is designed by God to be a helpmeet to a man and look to serve that man in doing God's work on earth. That is the frame of thinking that women got from God from the beginning. However, a feminist is a man-made social construct, and this man-made social construct is socially engineered to be direct competition against men. Direct competition that is designed to eliminate men as being heads as related to God's order, eliminate men as related to being a person who can go out here and be competition in the economy, and eliminate men as related to being a leader and authority figure in the community. This is what the wealthy and the elite want to do as related to the feminist, and they want to use the feminists to supplant the man's head position as head and authority in the world as related to the order of the world, and supplant God's order with their own. That's what they want to use the feminist for, and in order to do that, they indoctrinated women into the culture of feminism, starting in the 1960s with the rise of the feminist movement, because the feminist movement was diametrically opposed to women's rights. Women's rights was a campaign that started in the 1940s during World War II, when women went to the factories to take the jobs of the men to support the household while the husband was drafted into war. And as women suffered in those workplaces, having to suffer sexual harassment, sexual assault, and rape at the hands of predatory people who were in the workplace, this is where women started to advocate for policies to be put in place that were tangible in the women's rights movement, and advocated for these laws that were basically passed by the early 1960s. The Equal Pay Act was passed in 1961, and policies to protect people were put under Title IX, I believe, as related to things even before the feminist movement began. But the feminist movement in and of itself was designed again by the wealthy so that they could go out here and do things like have women be able to go into the workplace to supplant the man as head of household, and in married households be able to get the woman to become a second paycheck that would allow the government to be able to get taxes from both the man and the woman. So all of this was basically done to indoctrinate women into a feminist frame of thinking, and believed things like being a mother were not the things that a woman needed to prioritize, or managing the man's home. This was not something that needed to be prioritized. Moreover, they were taught that family wasn't important. And again, these ideas were things that women who were a part of the baby boomer generation and part of the silent generation were indoctrinated to socially engineer to think. And as they were socially engineered to have this frame of thinking, they learned how to become feminists. And as they learned how to become feminists, what this did was basically change the mindset of women from looking to serve men in God's order to going to think that they could go out here and serve the order of the government and corporate America and the global elite, making them a helpmeet to those wealthy individuals and not a helpmeet to the men that God had given them to be wives to be. Now, this whole thing created a culture in Western society, and this culture basically changed the way girls were raised to become women, and the culture that they learned how to become women changed, because instead of daughters learning how to be a helpmeet to a man and grow up to become a woman who would become a wife, what happened to many Western women who grew up from the late 1960s onward was they learned a culture from their mother, who was their first teacher, to become a feminist. And they learned this culture of how to become a feminist first because the mother basically was their first teacher, and as their first teacher, they taught their daughters to be a feminist like her. They taught her how to be a feminist like her by modeling this behavior of being this woman who put work and business first, and also taught their daughters how to be aggressive and competitive due to the abusive way that they treated them. Now, in a home where you have two parents and you have balance where the woman learns how to be a woman, what she does is teach her daughter the female life skills and survival skills to compete in the social marketplace. But when you have a feminist indoctrinated woman, she's not teaching her daughter the female life skills that will allow her to compete in social environments. No, she's teaching her how to compete like a man in the workplace. And as she looks to teach her how to compete like a man, she is very aggressive and assertive towards her daughter. And as she's aggressive towards her daughter, she's basically very cruel towards her daughter. And as she's cruel towards her daughter, this basically puts the daughter in a place where she starts to think the only way for her to survive is to go into the world of work. And as she's looking to go into the world of work, she's not looking to be that helpmeet to a man. No, she sees men as her competition. And as she sees those men as her competition, she basically sees a man as an enemy and an adversary. And as she sees that man as an enemy and an adversary, she doesn't see him as a partner to work with, but as a competitor to work against. And this is how a daughter winds up becoming indoctrinated into feminism unconsciously. Instead of her learning how to work with a man and be compatible with him, she's learning to become incompatible with him, learning how to fight against that man. And that puts her in a situation where when she tries to socialize as related to social situations, she winds up in a place where she's socially awkward. And as she winds up socially awkward, she winds up unable to be able to engage men or get the attention of men as related to relationships, or not even able to maintain a relationship, or even know how to develop nonverbal and verbal cues to get the attention of people. This is what happens with feminist indoctrinated women like the late Christine Chubbuck, a woman who was so socially awkward she did not know how to function, to the point where she got frustrated and wound up taking her life. And many women these days, they don't see how feminism basically damages their ability to be able to have interpersonal relationships with men, because they don't know how to compliment a man or work with a man. No, because they see him as a threat and a competitor, they can't really connect with a man as related to relationships. They wind up struggling because the way they were raised under feminism basically makes it where they cannot help meet the needs of a man because they see that man as direct competition to them. And as these women are raised in this culture of feminism, what happens to a lot of these women is they wind up being taught dysfunctional ideas, such as being sexually promiscuous, believing that they can be sexual like they think a man is, because the ideas that they've been taught about men are dysfunctional. A lot of times, these women are taught, oh, these men are sexually promiscuous and have multiple partners, when in actuality, many feminists grew up in single mother homes where they saw their mother modeling dysfunctional behavior with whoremonger males, and they think that that is a man, but they have never experienced an actual man who's a loving father. And this culture gets passed on to these women, and because this culture gets passed on, what they learn is how to be sexually promiscuous, and that basically makes it where they have no ability to be able to, again, socially connect with a man due to their poor social skills. And even worse, as they become sexually promiscuous, they can't pair bond with a man due to the multiple sexual partners they have, because these women were never taught that when you have a sexual relationship, the spirit of that man enters into yours and his DNA bonds with yours. And as he forms that spiritual bond, this prevents you from being able to connect with other men. And if you have too many partners, what happens is there's so many spirits inside of that woman, she winds up with her soul torn apart, and her soul torn apart to the point where she has serious issues as related to her emotional and mental health. These are the things that lead to many feminist indoctrinated daughters learning dysfunction that gets passed on. And as that dysfunctional culture gets passed on, what happens to those daughters is those daughters, as they are learning about learning how to be feminists, they wind up in a situation where they continue to get involved with all kinds of men and learn. And what happens is eventually these women wind up not becoming wives, but wind up becoming single mothers. And as these women become single mothers, what happens to these women is they wind up in a life paradigm of failure, where they wind up medicating their emotional pain with things to escape the trauma, such as food, such as alcohol, such as drugs, and even relationships. They just medicate their pain as related to their emotional state, because women are emotional, and that's all due to them being socially engineered to become feminists and not women. And as they're medicating their pain, all of these different businesses, from big business such as Madison Avenue Advertisers, Hollywood movie studios, and corporate businesses, make huge profits off this woman. And they make all of this money off of these women because they've been indoctrinated into feminism. And as they've been indoctrinated into feminism, yes, they do become heads of households, but those households remain bogged down in debt as these women look to do things to overcompensate for their lack of emotional and spiritual satisfaction. Some of these women go out here and try to medicate their pain by trying to overcompensate by getting more degrees to show how educated they are. Others, again, try to feed themselves to, again, escape their problems. Others drink alcohol to escape. And others use sexual relationships as a way to, again, try to find some sort of escape. And as these feminist indoctrinated women, again, get this culture passed down from generation to generation, they become more miserable in their own company, and they become more miserable in their own company, always looking to blame men who are a part of regular working class society. But those regular men who are part of working class society aren't their enemies. No, in many cases, their real enemies are the men who basically control big business, and those men basically are the ones they get their daily bread from. But many of these feminist indoctrinated women, they pass this culture of dysfunction on to their daughters, and as they pass this culture on to their daughters, they learn how to become feminists like their mothers, and they learn a life paradigm that basically leads to them winding up miserable generation after generation. And many of these women are so caught up in their pride as related to emotions that they can't really look at this pattern critically, because women are emotional and they don't really think critically about this pattern of failure that they're following. No, they just see the model that mom provided for them of being a single woman who got involved with a dysfunctional man. And as she got involved with that dysfunctional man and raised them to be aggressive like her, they don't see that the pattern that they're following has failed from generation to generation, from great grandmama to grandma to mama to auntie to cousins. They can't see the pattern. They can't see how the pattern is a paradigm of failure designed to, again, to make the wealthy richer at their expense, to keep them bogged down in debt, keep them medicating their emotional pain, keep them medicating their emotional pain while sitting there and saying they are empowered, but don't see how this whole life's paradigm is taking away their personal power. That's what many women don't really see, who have been indoctrinated into feminism, and they pass this culture on from daughter to granddaughter to great granddaughter, and this is what leads to a generation of women winding up in crisis, winding up in an unsatisfying life pattern where they are looking to, again, try to be like a man, but God did not mean for a woman to be like a man. No, he meant for the woman to help meet the man's needs and serve the man. And by serving the man, she serves God. And when she serves a godly man, she is serving God and showing the love of God. But these rich, wealthy men, again, they look to serve mammon. And because many women who are outside of God are naturally hypergamous, what they look to do is get the mammon. And sadly, when they get that mammon, they wind up in misery, because you cannot serve mammon and God. And when you serve mammon, mammon doesn't serve you. And that's what's happening to most of these modern women. Most of these modern women, again, pass this culture on to their daughters. And as they pass this culture on to their daughters, they basically put them on a road to being women in crisis who are on a road to a paradigm of failure that will never lead to them having any sort of success. Because success for a woman is different than a man. Success for a man may be having businesses and making money, but the real success is doing the work of God. And when it comes to both men and women, they have been taken off the road to doing the work of God by the wealthy, who basically want to be gods in and of themselves on earth, because they think being rich makes them a god. And the real success for women, again, under God's order, is going out here and getting married and bearing children and having a family and teaching the gospel to the next generation. That is the ultimate success. But what the devil has done is take these women off that road and done it in a way that basically makes sure that he reaps lots of tares for himself, reaps lots of tares, because feminist indoctrinated women basically are him putting those seeds in the ground that are become thorns and briars, and those thorns and briars grow from the mindset of feminism. That's what the mindset of feminism does, create this mindset where this woman is not focused on God, but focused on man and mammon. And that focus on man and mammon is why we have generation after generation of women becoming feminist indoctrinated women who become single mothers and then teach the next generation this pattern of dysfunction that ensures that he reaps a lot of tares and it's related to the souls of women. And again, this basically is the reason why we have a foundation for a woman crisis in the West. A woman crisis in the West, where women basically have learned this whole culture of dysfunction. And this culture of dysfunction is why you get a daughter who learns feminism from her mother subconsciously, and basically, again, sets the nation in a downward trajectory, because as the old African proverb states, a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women, and as the woman goes, so goes the race. And when it comes to the feminist indoctrinated women, her moral position is low because of her hypergamy and her greed. And because of her hypergamy and her greed, she basically has no moral position and will do anything because she wants to compete with a man and wants to take the place of a man in God's order, wants to usurp that position. That is the promise that the wealthy made to her, that she could be in the same position. This is the same lie that Satan told Eve, that she could know like God if she had the forbidden fruit. And what happens to a lot of these feminist indoctrinated women is that they look to try to take that place that God has made for men for women, and in some cases wants to take the place of God himself. And sadly, this is what leads to them falling into an abyss where they wind up spiritually lost and spiritually empty, and wind up on a road to spiritual destruction because they have no joy in this life, in this world, and no life in the next one, because they basically are out here looking to live a life that the devil has told them would be better, but the abundant life that Christ had for them, they don't want. I mean, God has a very abundant life for women, a very satisfying life for women, but sadly, many feminist indoctrinated women from multiple generations won't ever know that, because sadly, what the devil has done with feminism is take them away from the gospel, take them away from the gospel of Jesus Christ, take them away from the word of God, has them trying to be strong, independent women, trying to smash a patriarchy created by God, which is virtually impossible, but this woman believes these lies told to her by the devil, and this is why generation after generation of women after the 1960s in the West are on a bad road where they're not learning how to be women, but feminists who are eventually going to become women in crisis. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you want to pick up my book and learn more about how women wound up on this road to self-destruction, you can pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, and another book I wrote, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, on Amazon.com. And both of those books will show you how this whole cycle of perpetual feminism has created generation after generation of single mothers who will wind up miserable in their own company. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. Sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.
Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today.
Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.